Hey, this is Shelly Mae and welcome back. I know I've been MIA, but I've been sick for like the last few weeks and haven't had a voice. Still really don't have a voice, but I wanted to get my December wrap up done. Trying to stick with this channel. Consistency is the key, and I did read, so I wanted to let you all in on what I read. Didn't follow my TBR to the T, but here we go for December. So I did read The Bookshop in Berlin by Francoise Franco, and the preface was written by Patrick Modiano. I mentioned this one in my new release video for December. And so this memoir was actually released in 1945. It was rediscovered in an attic in France in 2010 and therefore republished. And Francoise Franco, she was born in Poland in the late 1800s, and her dream was to open a bookshop. And she decides to open this bookshop in Berlin due to the lack of French literature there. This is a bookshop for all the socialites, diplomats, artists, poets. Seems like the social hangout place, if bookshops have hangout places. And so unfortunately though, due to an attack on Jewish shops and businesses in the late 1930s, she closed her bookshop to avoid being attacked as other businesses were. And all of that's covered in the first chapter, and so we spend the rest of the book following her escape to Switzerland. This was a woman of courage. You knew she had courage. She basically did this escape on her own while she had help from friends. She basically traveled alone. So I gave the story 3 stars. And what was a highlight was the writing. You know, she traveled different places, and you really felt like you were there with her. You could follow it. You could see what she was going through. Even in her older age, it took a while for her. Took years for her to actually escape. And so, but what I wished is that we knew more of her personal side of her story outside of the escape. I wish we knew more about her family. While she mentions the family, we don't get much of that. Actually, when she is brought up in the preface, that actually when she opened the bookshop, she was married. She don't say nothing about her husband in the story. So I would have liked to have seen that. I think that would have changed up the pace of the story. Next, I listened to The Last Affair by Margaret Hunt. And this one is a mystery. And it opened up, we met Gwen, who had been murdered. Well, that's how the story opens up. Gwen wasn't, I'm not for murder, but Gwen was not the best person to deal with. Her family didn't care much for her. While she portrayed a life, she was this suburban housewife, but she just wasn't nice to people. She created enemies along the way. So once we found out that she was killed, the story takes us back to 6 months before her murder. And we meet Nora and Josh, and the affair is between Nora and Josh. Josh is married to Gwen. Nora is the opposite of Gwen, and you can see why Josh fell for her. It wasn't intended that they would have an affair. They ran into each other at business conferences, and they knew each other back home, but they ran into each other at a business conference, ended up sleeping together, and it turned into an affair. Then we meet, I can't remember her name, the daughter of Josh and Gwen, and she's actually the one that discovered the affair. She comes back home because her boyfriend has cheated on her, and so she decides to drop out of college, and she comes back home, and she finds out that her dad is having an affair. She doesn't know who Nora is, so she goes on a flight to find out who this woman is. And so that was like the highlight of the story for me. I gave this one 5 stars, and it was because of the suspense and finding out who killed Gwen. We don't know to the very end who killed her. I enjoyed that, and I also enjoyed the way that the daughter found out, the way she found out who Nora was, the way she researched it. I wish she had held it a little bit longer. I wish she hadn't have told it so soon. But I won't tell you how she found out who Nora was, but that was an enjoyable part for me. Also, I don't know, y'all, is a mystery supposed to bring you to tears? Because at one point I was tearing up, and this is because of Nora and her husband, Carter. His story, his position, where, you know, it just had me sad. He was an alcoholic, and of course this story addresses individuals being involved in a marriage that they're not happy in. I think a lot of people would identify with the story, as it talks about the effects that being in a marriage, how the kids can see it. You're staying for the kids, and they can tell you're not happy. So I recommend this one. The next one that I read was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Taylor Hibbert, and this was romance. And we meet Chloe Brown. She is chronically ill and is close to death one day, and due to that incident, she decides to make a list, and it's like a bucket list, things that she wants to do before she dies. So the first one was move out of her parents' home. She moves out, and she meets the superintendent of the building that she is now staying in, and initially his name is Red. They don't get along, but he ends up being her love interest and helping her reduce her bucket list. I gave this one 5 stars. I think in a lot of cases men get a bad rep because they don't know how to be there for their women. They're not sensitive to the things that women or girlfriends, wives were experiencing. And Red was not like that. He, even with Chloe not always telling him how she felt, he knew that she didn't feel well, and he knew how to be sensitive to that. He knew the right things to say and the right things to do. And I actually didn't realize that this was a series, so this was the first book in that series. Lastly, I read Don't Block Your Blessings by Patti LaBelle. If you don't know Patti, Patti is an R&B singer. She got her start in the 1960s. She opens her autobiography up with a video shoot. And she tells how she's mentally not there because she's just buried her sister the day before. We then go into finding about her life in chronological order. This autobiography was actually released in 1996. So we now know Patti as the solo artist, but she actually got her start in a group, which was the LaBelles, and then turned into the Bluebells. With her story, we hear about grief, as she lost all her sisters before they all turned 50, and so of course she was afraid that she was going to lose her life by 50 as well. We hear about sexual abuse. If you know Patti, she is has this infectious attitude, and she wants to put on the best show. She's always lively, but she dealt with confidence issues when she was younger because of her looks. She didn't like the way she looked, so she came out of that. Real, she was real. She said she was going to be real in the story, and she didn't hold back. We heard things about artists that were in the industry back in her time, back in 60s, 70s. She gave dirt. Some of the dirt, I was like, I didn't know, she would, I'm like, was it okay for her to tell that? I don't know. But she didn't hold back. That was one of my favorite parts. I gave that one 4 stars. So it's a backlisted, very backlisted. But yeah, check it out. So that's all I have for December. I was supposed to read Children of Blood and Bone. I'm still working on that one. And Ted Bundy, the serial killer, the American serial killer. I started it. Was nothing wrong with it. I just wasn't in the mood to read it. So at some point, I'm going to finish that one up, and I'll let you know how I felt on that one. So until next time, I will talk to you all later.